When you think of the United Nations, what comes to mind? Probably that big building in New York City, right? Diplomats at podiums, big debates in the General Assembly. But what does the UN actually do day to day out in the world? Well, today, we're going to go beyond the headlines and see how the UN really works on the ground. Okay, let's just jump right in with a number that might actually surprise you: 70%. Now, what on earth could that refer to when we're talking about an organization as massive as the UN? Yep, that's it. A full 70% of all UN spending happens out in the field, at the country level. It just completely flips the script on this idea that the UN is this big, bloated headquarters operation. The real action and the real money is happening thousands of miles away from that New York skyline. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll get into the UN's ground game. Then we'll meet the two different kinds of leaders running the show. After that, we'll dive into the tricky world of funding, look at a proposed fix, and finally, ask a really tough question. How do you even define success? All right, first up, the UN's ground game. Let's pull back the curtain and see what these things called country teams actually look like. And the first thing you have to know is there's really no such thing as a standard UN country team. There's no cookie-cutter model here. Their size, their mission, it all changes dramatically depending on where in the world they are. And I mean, the difference in scale is just staggering. You've got these massive operations like in South Sudan with over 4,000 staff, big teams in Bangladesh with 1,800 people. And then, get this, on the other end of the spectrum, you have offices in some Pacific Island nations with just 2 people. 2! So who's in charge of these incredibly diverse teams? Well, that brings us to our second section: 2 hats, 1 mission. Because it turns out there are 2 very different kinds of leaders running these operations. So on one side, you have what's called the multi-hatted RC, or RC. These are the folks wearing, well, multiple hats. They're leading huge humanitarian or peacekeeping missions, focusing on life-saving work in a crisis. On the other side, you've got the single-hatted RC, who leads smaller teams focused on long-term development and policy stuff with the local government. And here's where the resources really show the difference. Those multi-hatted RCs, in just 28 countries, are managing 71% of all the on-the-ground spending. Meanwhile, the single-hatted folks, spread across 130 countries, are managing the other 29%. It's this huge divide that shows how the UN's priorities can look totally different, depending on if a country is in crisis mode or not. Now, that massive gap in resources is all tied to how the UN gets its cash. So for Section 3, we need to follow the money. This is where we uncover one of the biggest headaches for UN teams: the earmarking dilemma. So if you look at how the money flows, about 60% of it is earmarked. That's a fancy way of saying donor countries give money with a whole bunch of strings attached. It has to be for this project in this village. That leaves only about 40% as flexible core funding that teams can actually direct to where they see the biggest need. And the consequence of that is just enormous. As the source material puts it, this earmarking largely explains country team size and presence. In other words, the UN's footprint in a country is often shaped more by what donors want to fund than what the country and the UN agree is most important. So, how do you fix a system like that? That's what we're looking at in Section 4. The UN has some ideas, but you have to ask, are we talking about a small fix for a really big problem? One of the main ideas being floated is something called expertise on demand. Okay, think of it like an internal gig economy for the UN. Instead of hiring some super expensive outside consultant, a country team could just tap into this marketplace of UN experts from all over the world. It's meant to make them faster and more agile. It sounds pretty smart, right? But it does make you wonder, are we just fiddling with the knobs on implementation when the real problem might be way, way bigger? Yeah, analyst Ronnie Patz absolutely nails it with this quote. He points out that this whole conversation is obsessed with implementation, the how, but there's almost zero talk about the global politics and the top-down governance that really sets all the rules in the first place. And that's really the heart of the matter. You could have the most efficient, brilliant country team on the planet, but if decisions being made in world capitals are prioritizing short-term politics over long-term needs, well, that team's hands are tied from the start. All of this leads us to our final and maybe most important section: defining UN success. Because, as they say, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. With all these competing pressures, how in the world do you even know if you're making a difference? Well, step 1 is you have to name your demons, right?
The UN has identified 5 huge challenges: growing polarization around the world, those earmarks we just talked about, something they call polycrisis, which is just having to deal with multiple disasters at once, fragmentation within the UN itself, and maybe biggest of all, a lack of trust.
So, to try and fight back against all that, a really interesting idea has been put on the table: a UN success dashboard. It's an attempt to create a clear scorecard with 12 specific indicators to actually measure progress against those giant problems. And you can actually boil those 12 indicators down to 3 simple but really powerful questions. First, outcomes. Are we actually hitting the Sustainable Development Goals and keeping people safe? Second, system performance. Is the UN itself working well? Is it efficient and coherent? And third, trust and integrity. Do our partners on the ground actually trust us to get the job done?
And that leaves us with this one last really challenging thought. A dashboard is great. It's a huge step forward. But can any UN country team, no matter how great it is, no matter how well you measure it, be truly effective on the ground if the entire system of global governance is totally gridlocked at the top? It's a question that really gets to the very heart of the UN's future.